Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, it was a familiar script and a familiar result as football ruins a great Saturday in the LBK.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you on the other side of a wild time at Jones Stadium as the Red Raiders fall to the Buffaloes 41-27. The final score. Was the score indicative of the game? Was it not indicative of the game? I don't really know because I feel like there were about 15 mini games within that set of four quarters.
There's a lot going on.
That's right. As things were swinging wildly one way to another, even down to a final potential game-tying drive that kind of boggled the mind that you even had that opportunity, of course, derailed by a fumble. But nonetheless, a few things to get into as we review the ball game here today, including what happened up front for Texas Tech. Offensively was not pretty. We'll get into the day for the defense against a potent offense that Colorado is packing. But wanted to kick off the conversation, Chris, just revisiting what a familiar script this has seemingly been for Texas Tech, in that we've seen some games prior where you've gotten off to a decent start and then there's been a lull. And in some of those, you've gotten over it and been able to rescue a win later on in the game. There are also some points in other games where you establish a margin, maybe not right out of the gates, but you see that vanish and maybe you don't finally rebound and get over it to rescue a win in those situations. But it seems like we have seen this movie before as far as the ebb and flow of a ball game. Got off to a great start, albeit one that still left a lot of points on the table. And I think a lot of Red Raider fans probably thinking about that as you head into the halftime break. Was not a good omen for the day at large or for the second half. But tough one to take. Credit to Colorado for being the better team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And getting a win on the road. Tech now removed from any hopes of an appearance in Arlington. And Colorado's path maybe even cleared up a little further to possibly get them to Arlington. So a whole lot to process from that one.
Yeah, very well-behaved Colorado team as well.
That's right.
Kudos to them. But they the takeaway that I guess on the actual game, there's a million things to get into, and we've got all week to do it, or different tentacles here. But my main takeaway from like the Colorado team, it's not anything that they did on offense. It's how good their defensive front was, and we'll get into some of that. But that's where I think that kind of changed the ebb and flow of the game, because I think that you had them on their heels, and then that group just started to clamp down and play much better than you were. And you couldn't – I mean, you ran Taj Brooks 31 times in this game. 20 of those 31 carries were for 3 yards or less.
Mm-hmm.
20. And I felt – in some ways it felt forced. In some ways it felt – but – I went back and watched this, and in a lot of these runs, and I don't know what's called, what's checked into, what's checked out of. I'm not privy to all that, and I don't, so I can't. But I know enough to know that when they've got 4 down, like prime example, and this is part of what you're kind of talking about just hitting that lull. Because in some ways it's like the Baylor game, the TCU game, the Iowa State game, and the Colorado game are very similar in this sense. It just seems like you can't get everything going at the same time. Yeah. It's like offense starts out well, defense is playing pretty good, and then they both just kind of go deep breath, and then you can't do anything on offense, and then it's the defense starts to give up a little bit here and there, and you just can't get on the same page. There's no magic wand there that fixes that. Like, okay, guys, let's huddle up in here. Let's get everything going at the same time. Okay, ready, break. It just doesn't work like that. But that's what happened against North Texas earlier in the season. And you just blew up on the Mean Green there, and then you put them away. It's like everything was happening correctly at the same time in all phases. But these teams are tougher. These teams are better. In these games, there's far less margin for error in these games. But I felt like I was watching the same thing over again from the week before in Ames, but just you ended up getting a different result there. But I know enough to know that when you have four, because like remember the long kick return by Jacoby Williams near the end of the half, and you run it on the first play, and there's just boos raining down from everywhere.
Yeah.
If you go rewatch it, it's 4 down linemen and pretty much just one linebacker in the box. And I think at every level of football, like that's a run. And this is the same thing you were seeing at the end of the game when you're busting them off for 15, 18 yards when Taj was kind of marching down the field. And that's where you just couldn't get anything going. They were playing coverage and all those things, but I just thought that defensive line, they were better than you were by a lot, and they largely controlled the game. But because if you can't run it against what they're going to call in football terms a small, a box where you just don't have, it's math. It's like we've got enough guys to block enough guys, and we've got a runner, and so he should, but. It just that wasn't really the way it was working for most of the second and even some parts of the third quarter. Very similar to last week in Ames, but the whole thing is very frustrating. And I think offensively, it's fair to criticize here. There's just no doubt. I think you left a lot on the table, and whether you put it on Coach Kitley, Baron Morton, the offensive line. Shared, whatever. I mean, this is just there was some opportunities that, but there was some lack of execution too. And whether you get into this or that, whether a play call or whatever, if you can't run it whenever they're kind of almost baiting you into it, I just think that's not a good recipe for your football team. And you continue to take the bait. And anyway, but that's, yeah, same script. I think, you know what, and I'll say this too, because when you wrote familiar script, I didn't think you necessarily meant the game. I hate it for this fan base, man. I hate it for you and you get like right there, and you want to kick the door in kind of game with a lot on the line, and you just can't win that one. It's I don't, whether that's the Baylor game 2 years ago, whether that is, I don't know, the Wyoming or Oregon game last year, or, I don't pick a different one. I don't know if you
Baylor game a few weeks ago.
Yeah. If you had that moment. Yeah, exactly. I just, I just, because the atmosphere was great, short of a few folks, depositing their materials on the field at different times. There was a phenomenal atmosphere. I had seen more Texas Tech greatness on that sideline than really any time I'd ever been doing this. And I've been doing this like sideline stuff for, I guess I'm in my 15th, 16th season. But it was a who's who in many ways down there. There was a lot of career touchdown receptions and sacks and rushing yards and all that down on the sideline from former players. I mean, DeAndre Washington, Dakota Allen, Brandon Williams, Michael Crabtree, Eric Ward, Danny Amendola, who I got a chance to speak with.
Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, Tyree Wilson.
And then all the throwbacks that were there too that are not even from the modern. I mean, it was a who's who. Yes. And Jason Sasser. From a basketball standpoint, it was just a lot of, and it's fun to have that back. And it was kind of a celebratory thing, and the crowd was great, and the atmosphere was great, and you just couldn't get it done. And that's another opportunity that, because the reality is you've lost 3 of your last 4, you've lost back-to-back home games, and you're okay / good, but you're not great, especially in a lot of spots.
football-wise. And I don't know how great Colorado is. I'll say my main takeaway is that I was most impressed by what they did up front on defense. They controlled the game. I'm going to throw some of these out at you. And you tell me if you don't take this and run as fast as you can, like Forrest Gump, down the road, hoping that nobody will take it away from you, and you tell me if you think you're winning this game. They were 3 of 12 on third down, they being Colorado. You forced them to punt 8 times. Their longest play on offense, 24 yards. You hold them to 60 yards rushing. You don't turn them over. There's a few things there, but I mean, like largely, if I tell you that on Friday night, you'll be like, dude, where's the bookie? I mean, like how much? Okay, how much are we comfortable laying down on this thing? I mean, those are, but it just that's why the stat sheet in some ways just doesn't really tell the story. You had them rattled from the get-go, but just couldn't quite sustain it, obviously.
Yeah, I'm curious. Well, and going back to those stats, another indication as to why stats can be for losers, or typically are. We've seen that script flipped the opposite way several times this year. It's like the biggest win that Tech got this season. They were the statistical losers, but were winners on the scoreboard. Then you go back to like the game against Texas Christian, and you feel like you cover all these stat categories, but you're the loser on the scoreboard. So I don't know. We need an ugly statistical day, I guess, is the recipe that we're looking for moving forward, but 1 point more than the opposition. Back to that word script. There's always so much made about, a scripted drive for the offense coming out of the gates, and the script was looking nice first time the offense had the ball in their hands. But we've also seen what seems like, I just wonder what you credit it to. Is it a defense adjusting? Is it the offense not being as capable, or an offensive play caller not being as capable when the script is not already written? Is it a combination of all of the above? Because I feel like we have seen Tech like come out of the gates, first offensive possession, which you would think would be a very great thing, and usually it is, and you have success, and then man, it's like Jekyll and Hyde. You look like a totally different group on some subsequent drives. What's your take on what that's all about? Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet only $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and a whole lot more, all in one place. So when you get a hunch, a gut instinct in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a gut feeling again, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
I don't think Zach Kitley does necessarily script the first 10 or 15 plays. There's some coaches that do that like, okay, they write up the first 10 or 15 and then they rep that in that order over and over again. And that's why a lot of teams, you'll see them do what we're talking about, and they run through it because they memorize it. They're in order. I think Coach Kitley and a lot of coaches, they have drive starters. They have certain things because, anytime you even script it, I mean, you don't know what happens if you get the ball on the other team's 30-yard line and you've got all this 15 play. I mean, that may adjust so it's always a loose interpretation of what a script is, or
if you have like a negative play or something,
sure,
that changes what you need to do on the next one. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's a combination of other teams adjusting. It's a combination of let up, and it's a combination of at some point you're just not very good in some spots.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all the above. Really, there's a shared, kind of either concern or blame or however you want to phrase that. But because I think you've jumped out on some teams and you've looked pretty good and you're playing fast, and then other teams answer with whether it's an adjustment or whether they kind of calm down and they're not, we're not going to freak out when we see this motion or this matchup. Like, okay, I've just seen, whatever it is. So I think it's because I've seen a lot of people, wonder about that. Like, oh man, after that first script runs out, we don't know what we're doing. But then, because I think what is interesting is the offense has been able to start to get it together after looking like dead in the water in the third quarter, and like all of a sudden you start playing fast again and able to answer and put together these long drives. Did it in the Baylor game. Did it in Fort Worth, obviously, against TCU. Did it in Ames. To a certain extent, did it against Colorado, but again, can't sustain that. And you lose the turnover battle 3-0. You get sacked 7 times, 5 of which of those sacks were in the fourth quarter. But it's just, I think there were some things working against you too that you're just, at some level you're just not very good up front, and that was a mismatch, large in part on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that brings us to the rented mules, government mules, redheaded stepchild portion of the program, because you were beating like all of the above. And again, you just got to, I think, credit Colorado for making it look as bad as it looked. I wasn't so sure that Warren Sapp hadn't just snuck out there himself in a jersey, because it looked like several Warren Sapps on the field, man. It was ugly in the trenches. And that is the one thing that I think really, maybe deserves, or Deion Sanders and his coaching staff deserve the most credit for, and what they've been able to do on the defensive side of the football and kind of changing the game from prior to their arrival, or just year 1 to year 2. I don't know how it looks against a capable or competent offensive line, but against what Tech was rolling out, it was nasty. And I think that was the difference in the ball game. I mean, I know there are a lot of things that play into it, but that's really where it is won or lost. And Chris, I know I already mentioned this once today. I mentioned it on the reaction video on Saturday night after the game. But you had a chance to get off to a well of a start, and you really wasted it. 13-0 wasn't it. 24-0 might have been. 28-0 might have been. But when you're settling for field goals, and then one of those after a stop, I think you don't get anything. I don't know how you didn't have that sinking feeling at halftime. As a Tech fan, we have seen that script before. New record for how many times I can say script in a show is going to be set today. We've seen that before, like going back to some UT games. I think maybe 2006 was one of those where it's like, well, I'm pretty sure we're going to need more than, say, 21 points to win this game. And I'm saying at halftime, pretty sure we're going to need more than 13 points to win this game. So there was already kind of a sick feeling in my stomach going into halftime, given just how much you had left out there. But part of that had to do with what your defense was giving you. And I think they fought their tails off. It wasn't a perfect day, obviously, but given what Colorado's working with guys like Hunter and guys like Shedeur Sanders, and I don't know why we could never figure out the horizontal quick pass to Shepard. They loved that play, and I see why, because it was going for like 8 to 15 or more.
Looks a little bit different looks a little bit different than when you run it. That's what legit speed looks like there, doesn't it?
Well, and also legit blocking on the outside, like
or holding,
not being in your lap as a pass catcher,
or holding. But I digress.
Hey, what's the difference?
Yeah.
But I really thought. And this is where you got to get, I think, to some credit for Shedeur Sanders for being as freaking slippery as he is, because I honestly thought, like, against a lot of other quarterbacks, you might have had one of your better pass rush days, because I thought, the pocket was collapsing a little bit more often than we had seen, certainly in some other weeks, but he's just able to get out of it. And you hammered that all week long last week. Like, when the pocket collapses, maybe now is when you're in real trouble, because he's so good at getting out of there and still keeping his eyes downfield to make plays.
He's one of the best.
First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite event again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app, where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. Of course, you're always doing it at the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that final brat, that final beer at your own pace at the tailgate, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Game Time gives you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Game Time app and create an account and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed.
He's one of the best normal players I've seen in a long time. And what I mean by that is there was nothing in this game that he did that looks otherworldly at all or close to it. I mean, I thought Baker Mayfield came in here and when he was playing with OU and looked really good. And there was some like, oh my gosh, those throws are like Kyler Murray back in 2018 was like freakish. I thought Shedeur Sanders his numbers were somewhat modest. He didn't make any like what I would term big league throws. He made several throws to the ground or overthrew it and was kind of rattled at times. But he never put his team in harm's way. And he made plays with his legs. And he just kind of continued to take what you gave him. And he has the playmakers around him to take something that there's not much there and like gone. The one touch pass in the corner of the end zone to Webster, I think it was, or Wester, maybe
Wester,
I should say. Yeah, that was a big league throw, but that was just a touch pass. But again, longest play, 24 yards. I mean, you made them work. You kept it in front of them. You tackled well. I mean, Travis Hunter had a decent day offensively, but he wasn't like some. It wasn't like this ooh and ah, this and that. I mean,
could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse, sure. But he just kind of he's got a lot of talent around him. It's skill player wise and legit speed. That looked like Oregon at some level in some of those spots.
I said the same thing. I said the same thing in the second half, man. Some of those guys were so explosive.
Yeah, I mean, like trying to tackle a salamander or something. It's like, you just Hunter's balance and his ability to you just not able to get a clean shot, or he just kind of was always able to bounce or back up or stay on his feet is just like I've never seen it. Hell, the one play that won't show up on the stat sheet at all, when he jumped up and intercepted the one pass and he jumped like 9 feet in the air, I was like, somebody should put that on his highlight reel, even though it didn't count. I mean,
1,000%. I was going to bring that up. I think the most amazing play I saw didn't even count.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. But I go back to a group that we didn't talk about a lot last week. Was just their defensive front seven, specifically their defensive line. When they're able to play that four-man front and largely contain your run game and largely get pressure on the quarterback, and you don't really have an answer via the run game, or and there's a time or three that Barron needed to get rid of the ball quicker, and I'd have to go back and look to be sure. Maybe his guys are manned up and there's just nobody open, but at that point, just throw it away, throw it in the stands. But you take a sack and things like that. But I just thought that group that's the group that, to me, if they will continue what they did, that's the group that will allow them to get in the college football playoff as much as anything. You can talk about Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders all you want, but that's the group that will allow them to get to where they want to go, not the other way around. I firmly believe that. But, you hadn't been worked over like that all year, really. And it's an undersized group, but they play really hard. And there's some legit talent up there. A couple of guys will probably go be in the NFL sooner than later. But I just thought they largely controlled the entire game. Yeah. And I wasn't prepared to say that. And I know you're average up front, and you can have issue with play call or issue with Baron Morton, and many have, and I certainly, that's all fair. Comes with the territory, but I thought you got exposed a bit up front. And I think even after the game, Joey McGuire even said about like that Clay McGuire had said, "Hey man, I cost us this game." Yeah. And whatnot. And so Clay's being too hard on himself right there, because you're working with an undersized, semi-inexperienced group at times. And they got beat up pretty good, I thought. And it's
their most experienced guys playing at a position where we've spent the last 8 months talking about, well, he's not going to play at this position. He can't play at this. Caleb Rogers as a tackle. He's supposed to be a center, then a guard. Now he's a tackle, and we saw why they wanted to make him a center or a guard several times. And then you're portal heavy otherwise. And I just don't know when you're ever going to get to the point where you feel like you can build a quality offensive line having to lean so heavily in the portal.
And that's going to continue to be. I think we said it multiple times at the end of last season, and some as we were going through the process. That is the position group that has got to get better, or you're just kind of spinning your wheels to a certain extent as a program. And I would say, you're going to have you're going to have to address the defensive line as well, especially on the interior.
Sure.
And I think that Texas Tech was not alone in this. I don't know if how many people were, and some people were like, well, we don't care, but Colorado, they're paying their. Heavy rumor here, but I believe it to be true because I've been told the same version of the story by about 10 to 12 people that are close to the situation. Because there's one, I believe the kid that played at UTEP that is now starting for Colorado on the offensive line, and who you were in on, and I think he was like top of your board, and I think Colorado paid him $250,000, and I don't think you were anywhere near that, and a lot of programs weren't. But he's like, guess what? I'm going to be a buff, and I think everybody underestimated like trench players, the going rate, if you will, on what that was going to be, because as you stated. It's hard to build it that way, but there's very few of those guys that I think can make legitimate impacts. I say very few. I mean, there could be 200 out there in the portal, but there's maybe 1,000 to go get. So one out of every 5 is really going to help somebody. You follow me? I mean, yeah. So there are people that can help you, because I think Vinny Scurry was going to help you. I think he had shown, and I think Monroe Mills helped you the year before.
I think Davion Carter's helped you.
Yeah,
I mean, physically he's got limitations, but I think he's helped you.
That's the problem. Is I just think that with something like that, it's like he's 270. He's giving you all he's got, but he's just limited. And against a big boy game like what you're in, it just sometimes that shows up worse than others. But yeah, to your point though, that's just something that continues to need to be addressed, and it will continue to be worked on. It's being worked on now, I'm sure, and it will be a heavy storyline for us in December once the portal window opens, because you probably need 2 at minimum. And you took a guy like a Maurice Rodriguez that was taken before Clay McGuire got here, and he's a junior college guy that I think he did command some money because he was out there and one of few that that were still left, and you gave him a lot, I think, and then he's just not ready to play and can't help it. He's essentially redshirting this year. If he'll even make the cut when you trim rosters, I don't know. But there's a bigger picture problem there, but it really showed up against Colorado, and I just wasn't expecting to see that.
And one of those things that was semi-entertaining following the ball game, at least for internet people like us, some anonymous peckerhead responding in an embarrassing way to Cody Campbell and saying bias a new offensive line with some other regrettable language involved. And Campbell responded with, I will. So I'm going to hold him to that, because that's what it's probably going to take if you hope to improve yourself as a program. I mean, look, this is
Cody knows, man.
Of course.
I mean, Cody,
he's an old lineman.
Yep. That, not only that, but who was his roommate in college was Clay McGuire.
Mm.
And that's the guy largely in charge of coaching this group. So they know as much as anybody else on the planet how important that is. However, it's easy to say buy your way out, because if you go because the first and foremost, you're going to go try to find you somebody that is elite, great, really good to above average, however you want to phrase that, an upgrade. Okay, there's different levels to that. They will have whoever this individual is. You better have picked correctly, and then this individual is largely going to have a lot of options.
Oh yeah.
A lot of options
You
out
still got to
there.
recruit them. I mean, it's a lot about money, but it's not always all or only about money to these guys. I mean, it's just one part of it.
Yep, that's right. So there's a lot of pieces and a lot of that factors into that, but it's just and that's why people may not want to hear this, and I get it. I'm going to say it anyway. There's a lot a lot of criticism that Barron has taken, Zach Kitley has taken, those two specifically. Everybody internally understands what they've been working with on the offensive line and understand what a huge problem it is. And I'm not trying to be personal with some of the guys that are trying. They're doing what they can. There's just some limitations, and some guys are playing. I mean, Porsche, he wasn't recruited to come here and play guard. You thought you were going to have Vinny Scurry, and you thought maybe Maurice, whatever. Okay, so past that. There's a reason that you have got so many tight ends that are playing, and maybe you don't throw to them as much because they're so, like last year, heavily involved in the run game. But in some ways, it's a miracle that, and then miracle is too strong of a word, but that you've put up the amount of points you have, that Taj has done is what he's done, and all that. But you also see the limitation of the running game and Taj Brooks in a game like this. When I tell you 31 carries, 20 of those are for. Because, remember going back to the North Texas game, and Joey McGuire says to me at halftime, we're walking off the field, and you just put up a massive second quarter. He's like, we got too many no yard and 2-yard gains, with our running back. And that's been a consistent thing. So what you're dealing with is just a group. It's the same thing as last year. And we said it in December. You've got to address this group. They tried. I think that it's still very, very average. At times it's better than others, but it will continue to be worked on and addressed. And Cody knows this as much as anybody. And I do think that he is somebody that's in a position to attempt to fix it because he cares and he understands as much as anybody, as well as does his college roommate.
Yeah, and you ain't got to be an offensive lineman or an offensive line coach to know that the trenches is where games are won or lost. I mean, this has been football for, 150 years. That's why they're the hardest to recruit. Everybody wants them. Tech historically is getting 15th pick in the state or something. I have no idea. Sometimes you win battles, sometimes you don't. Whether it was Mike Leach, Spike Dykes, pick your coach from yesteryear. When they had quality or above average defensive fronts or offensive fronts, they probably had quality or above average seasons. When they did not, they probably had middling to bad seasons. I mean, it's just the way it is. So you've either got to improve it or don't. And if you don't, you may still be very well on your way to bowl games and things like that, because it's not a real high standard to get to a whole game. But if you want to compete for hardware or anything interesting, even in this new Big 12, you've got to be better there. So if you were able to flip that script and sustain it, another script, new record, then you'll change the trajectory of the program, because again, the past of this program has been intermittent success in those areas. And when you have success in those areas, again, you have success as a team. So I hope like hell that they can do it. But it's nothing new.
I will say this too. This is just personal, and Calvin, you're going to know where I'm going with this, but I hope Mason Tharp is okay. That concerns me. He's a phenomenal kid. His dad watches this show all the time. He's been such a big part of the Taj Brooks record being broken, maybe as much as anybody else. He missed some time last year. I certainly understand it, but I hope he's okay, and I don't know what that looks like for the next couple of games and all that left in the regular season. But bigger picture, I don't know if you'll be quite as tight end heavy next year. You'll theoretically still have John Carlos Miller here. I bet you go get you one in the portal, but you may see a lot more 11 personnel in this, next year with what we were to know right now. And you won't have this big bruiser of a running back or anything like that. Maybe you're a little more spread and wide open and more speed. I don't know what to think yet on kind of what it looks like with your team and everything like that. But, because you'll see Conyers and Tharp obviously exhaust their graduation, as will Taj Brooks and Josh Kelly. So there's a lot of production to try to replace right there. But I guess I say all that to just say I hope Mason's okay. He's one of my favorite kids. He's such a great dude, and I hope that I hope all is good there.
So we've spent 30 plus minutes discussing everything but the guys in the striped shirts. Do we bring them up now? Because if we do, you know what you get. 60-second of officiating conversation will result in reaction disregarding the first 30 minutes. Oh, you can't blame it all on the refs, which we're not doing. But that was one of the most embarrassing displays of disorganization I've ever seen. I cannot believe Tuta Shinda Salam, the referee, somehow we got Rashawn Salam's kinfolk officiating a Colorado game in Lubbock. I'm only left to assume. But that was terrible, bad, and seemingly noticed by unbiased observers across the nation.
Yeah, and I'm never going to be a blame the officials for losing guy. I just don't believe in that.
No, we err on the side of not even mentioning them on most shows, but that was egregiously bad.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, there were some things that happened with the crowd. I think there were some things that happened with the no call. I just thought the crew in general did a poor job of managing the game. I think they allowed taunting to go on way too long. They allowed a lot to go on. There was flags that picked up, bad explanations. I mean, this part didn't hurt you, but when Taj Brooks scored on a 4th and 1 on the north end of the end zone, there was a question about what down it was supposed to be. Yeah. They dropped the chains, they lay them down. Right. And all that, and Tech they're in kind of a hurry up. They think it's first down and the whole bit, and it's like, oh, by the way, hey, the whatever 4th down, and they're kind of coming back trying to explain it. And even though the chains are dropped, and it's just some of the missed face masks were bad. The roughing the passer, call or no call, like the targeting on Barron, because when he calls targeting, he's leaving himself an out. It's a chicken. Fill in the blank, way to go about it. There's a face mask there. There is a roughing the passer that you pick your other penalty, but he gives himself targeting. So because you can simply go, there was no targeting, so we waive everything comes off the board. And I guess Tech's quarterback didn't complain enough about the calls, and then because the optics of some of what went on, it's as if a player talks his way into a penalty, and that's unfortunate because as I want to say Mark Mangino said many, many years ago, we know what this is about. It's about the BCS, right? So
I feel like it was Randy Crystal and UT reunited.
Yeah, I mean, but some of the crowd and all that and the reactions, I blame that on the officials for not controlling the environment with their mismanagement of the game. Picking up flags and allowing some of this talking to go on. Colorado players are throwing stuff back up into the stands, and it's just it was and heck, man, that wasn't even the biggest controversy from an officiating standpoint in the Big 12 conference over the weekend. So
I know, there's another show later on that night.
I can only imagine the conference office, that they were flooded over the weekend with and I'll tell you this too. There was many incidents that took place on Saturday that were unfortunate inside Jones AT&T, but I'll just leave it at that. But I think some people, don't and didn't handle themselves very well at all. And I'm not talking about people throwing stuff from the stands. I don't condone that. I think that's unfortunate. I'll say this about the officials. They probably let more go on there than they should have, and maybe should have penalized or maybe ask you to make an announcement quicker or somebody there, because there was plenty being thrown on before it really was ever addressed. There was an official that left this game, and then the sub came in. There was an incident with that's on video. I've seen it that involved one of Texas Tech's ball boys on the other sideline.
Right.
That was quite unfortunate. And
a racial slur thrown in, all in good fun.
Yeah. And it just, there's no place for some of that stuff, man. So
apparently there is the east side of Jones Stadium.
Yeah, but
There's
kudos
always
to all
morons in
the.
the crowd that don't know how to act. I'm not trying to castigate an entire fan base, obviously.
Oh no.
On occasion, I just wish they had a better arm or better aim.
Yeah, I think Tech's fan base is awesome, and they're borderline crazy in a good way. I mean,
Yeah, it's a shame, man. The football had to ruin a great day in the
Yeah.
LBK yesterday. I think it remains true. Lubbock is a drinking town with a football problem, and that remains true November 11th, 2024.
Yes, that's right. But
All right,
yeah,
Chris, we've got all week to get into a few more things. We're going to circle back to Taj Brooks. We're going to circle back to some questions you got about some decisions in game that have been rolling in. Keep them coming there. If you're a Matador Mob insider, you can kick them to us directly. And we'll get to what this thing is going to look like when you reconvene with a couple of games here to go in the regular season. So appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.
keep hope alive. I'm trying to tell myself the same thing, people. Guns up.
That's right. And get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Appreciate you for being out there as always, especially those everydayers, even through trying times. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for the time, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.